Hello everyone, I'm Colin Canet. I get ongoing questions from a variety of subscribers who ask me what kind of clamping situations they should use for different kinds of glue ups that they're working with. And it really depends on what you're doing, but today I want to show you 3 ideas that might work for some of the situations that you're working with. A lot of people are making boxes, square things like this, and typically they'll use mitered corners here. Same thing with picture frames. I hear from a lot of people who are making picture frames. I just made this as a mock-up to show you. Now, what happens when we're gluing corners together? Typically the glue is slippery and it wants to slide, especially when you've got mitered corners like this. So how do you glue those? Well, one of the things that I still use from time to time is one of these ratcheting clamps. Typically they're used for cargo tie downs, and you can buy these. I even get these at the dollar store. They're fairly inexpensive, and you know what? They're not heavy duty, but for this kind of thing they work perfect. And you know what? Banding clamps for picture frames are not really expensive. It's just that sometimes you don't have them handy. A local supplier might not have them. So sometimes I just end up at the dollar store and try and figure out something from there. And this was one of those situations. And I just make it so that it's roughly the size of the box before I start putting it together. And this one here wants to swing around a bit. The clamp on that side and these on that side. I've often thought about taking these big ugly clamping things here, these hooks off, and put something on a little bit more, a little less robust than this. But these are actually working fine. And typically for something a box this high, I would use 2 of these. And basically all you do is just sort of crank that down. And if your corners are mitered properly and you're glued, it'll have a tendency to want to square itself as well. So you don't have to worry so much about squaring, but you'll want to watch that, of course. And that's a great way of holding these pieces together as you're gluing them. Now the other thing that you can do, and these are pretty simple, you just drill a hole in and a couple of mitered corners, and that just gives you something a little bit bigger for these kind of band clamps or ratcheting clamps, something better for them to hold on to, and you put that around, and then you do the same thing. And I've got these in different sizes. This is a bigger size. You could make these quite a bit smaller so that they would just fit nicely in there. So lots of things you can do using these ratcheting clamps. Here's another sort of shop-made clamp that I've made recently, and you can see it's just from some recycled material. In fact, it's from plywood, and basically all it consists of are some little sliders, and you need to make these in different sizes. It depends what you're using. I made mine for 3/4 inch, and that means that when I put material that's roughly 3/4 of an inch, give or take a little bit, it fits in there. You can see that if it was a wide piece, obviously that's not going to fit in there because I can't put this sliding wedge in. But simply the way it works is you put the wood in, and I've only got 2 of them. You could make 4 of them if you want. It depends what you're doing with it. The only thing I worry about is that when I'm putting these together, that I make sure if I've got a long piece that it's the same height as the wood that I'm working with here. And you put one side in one side and the other, and you could you could use this for a miter. I don't have a miter here, but in this case it's just going to be a butt joint, and so you set up one of them and carefully align them. But what I like about this jig is sometimes I'll just give this a light tap with a hammer, but even when I don't do that, you can see how it lines up really nicely, and just with my finger, and look at that, it's really nice and firm in there, and that's a nice tight joint. You could glue that, you could put some pins in there, you could screw it, you could nail it, all sorts of things that you could do with that. So that's another quick way of making it. I'll put pictures for that in the article on Woodwork Web so you can check out the detail of that, but pretty simple to make something like that. And here's the setup that I used on another video, and you can see that I've even got anti-skid. And typically what I use these for is I'll put them on the edge of my workbench, and when I've got some wood that I want to plane down, I'll put that on there, and I have an easy way of holding on to that. But these also work for this, and here's how you can use them for that. Now you'll probably want to have a couple of them, and I've got a couple of them here, and you can flip them over. I would use that side down, and that anti-skid, of course, stops them from moving around. Then you just put your clamp in, and look, at the end of it will fit right over. Move the handle up there a little bit so you can see that. But see, it fits right over there. And there's a little bit of an angle, but you know what? In most cases, that isn't going to make any difference because the reach of it is still going to be able to clamp. So there's one quick way of doing a long reach, is just make a little extension, something like that. Quick and simple. The other thing that I've used, and you know what? Don't ever forget your hot melt glue gun. These are the handiest things. I use this often. And what I've done with that in the past is pretty much the same thing. Just put a couple of blocks somewhere. And now typically I'll try and do it on the back of the wood if that's possible. So I'll just put some hot melt glue on there, a couple of little blocks like that on there, and you can put them anywhere. Of course, for something like this, you want to put them as far away as you can, and then you can just tighten that down. And you'll need to let these set for a little bit, but they set and harden pretty quickly. Within 3 or 4 minutes, they'll be hard on there. Now, typically when you're clamping something like this, you don't want to crank it down so hard that it's going to pull these off. But once these are dry, as a rule, you can just whack them with a hammer and they come right off. Sometimes, and that's why if you're doing it on the back, sometimes depending on the grain of the wood that you're going, now this should be okay because it would be going against the grain. If it was with the grain, sometimes you'll pull some fiber off the wood underneath there. The glue is that strong that I've seen it actually do that. So you want to be careful with that. You could also chisel them off. That would be pretty easy to do, and just a little bit of sanding, because that glue doesn't go into the wood. It really sticks to the surface well. So just another idea, using your hot melt glue to put blocks on. Well, that concludes my video for today. There's a few quick ideas to help you with some of your clamping challenges. I'm Colin Canet for Woodwork Web. Thanks for watching.